In this video, I'm going to be comparing the Wizard of Oz franchise to the Scooby-Doo franchise. Now, recently, I've definitely done quite a good amount of videos where I'm talking about two franchises that I'm not familiar with whatsoever, but that is not the case here. I know both of these franchises quite well. I have nostalgia for Wizard of Oz because, first of all, I've read the original book from L. Frank Baum before. I also used to own the 1939 classic movie with Judy Garland on VHS tape. It's not a perfect film to be sure, but definitely a good movie, definitely a classic. So many elements of it are absolutely iconic. And in general, if you think about it, this story, these characters are absolutely a part of the popular culture. There's no place like home. We're off to see the wizard. I don't think we're in Kansas anymore. Somewhere over the rainbow, the evil wicked witch of the west, Scarecrow, Lion, Tin Man, Dorothy Gale. People know these characters, this story, even if you haven't seen a single Wizard of Oz movie. The chances are really high you've heard about Wizard of Oz in some way. It's very likely you're still at least somewhat familiar with this story. Like Peter Pan, Alice in Wonderland, Wizard of Oz is just one of these classic children's stories that everybody knows. It's soaked into culture. And while there are things about the 1939 movie that haven't aged all that well, like for example, if you actually stop and think for a second about Glinda the Witch of the North, you're like, ooh, man, Glinda's not good. It looks like she is, but oh man, her actions tell a totally different story. The message is contradictory because the movie is so famous for the line, "There's no place like home." Dorothy says, "I'm not going to leave here ever, ever again," which would probably terrify Uncle Henry and Aunt Em because the message here is apparently just stay home with your parents for the rest of your life. But then right after that, we hear Somewhere Over the Rainbow, a song which is about the exact opposite. It's not about staying home, it's about going out, seeking adventure, finding magical new places. It's so strongly associated with Wizard of Oz, and yet at the same time, so is the phrase, "there's no place like home." But still, there are other good adaptations of The Wizard of Oz. You have the movie Return to Oz, which isn't actually fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. It's a surprisingly dark movie for Disney to put out, honestly, because you have Dorothy going back to Oz and finding that, oh, the city of the Emerald City has been destroyed. All these people have been turned to stone. It's like, ooh, man, that's pretty heavy stuff for you, Disney. I definitely enjoy this movie. And you also have the Muppet version of Wizard of Oz, which is definitely flawed. I had a good time with it, but definitely not as good as the 1939 original. You've Oz the Great and Powerful, which I've seen, and that one is okay. It's not really all that good. There are good things about it, to be sure. There's some entertaining characters, there's good visuals. It's definitely not the best. I haven't seen other versions of The Wizard of Oz. I've just seen the 1939 original, Return to Oz, Oz the Great and Powerful, and the Muppet version of this story. There's actually 10 other versions of Wizard of Oz, though, to be fair, some of these are shorter animated movies that not as many people know about. A good amount of these movies are ones that people aren't really talking about, but fortunately, I'm very excited about the fact that we are actually getting a new installment in this franchise this year. We got a Wicked movie coming out. For me, as someone who has nostalgia for this story, I'm so excited to be able to actually watch a Wizard of Oz movie in theaters. That's makes me so happy that soon people will actually be talking about The Wizard of Oz again because we're getting a new movie. Now, the other franchise I'm looking at here is Scooby Doo, which is also nostalgic for me. I remember fondly watching episodes of Where Are You, Scooby Doo, the first TV show, and also What's New, Scooby Doo when I was younger. To be fair, if you go back and watch the first TV show, it hasn't aged that well visually. You can definitely easily tell that the filmmakers here did not have much resources to work with. They were working with a very limited budget, but I personally think there's something charming about these old school effects, even if they haven't aged that well. It makes the show look dated. I've seen quite a good amount of the Scooby Doo movies. Not every single one of them, but quite a good amount. Now, I think the first live action Scooby Doo movie from the early 2000s isn't that good. It both has some really juvenile moments in it, but also at the same time for me comes off as just too cynical and mean spirited for this franchise. Scooby Doo is supposed to be fun, lighthearted children's entertainment, and yet that's not the feeling I get from this first live action Scooby Doo movie. It's both too juvenile for adults to enjoy, but also too mean spirited to feel like it fits in Scooby Doo. So I don't think it really appeals to anyone. Then I don't think Monsters Unleashed is an improvement. That one also is just not very good. I think Scooby Doo The Mystery Begins, on the other hand, is totally fine, harmless, not all that bad. Not fantastic either, to be sure. The answer to the mystery is, well, pretty obvious. It's not hard at all to figure that out. But that one doesn't have big issues. For me, those first two live action Scooby Doo movies have big issues. I wouldn't say Scooby Doo The Mystery Begins does. It's more like, okay, yeah, perfectly fine, perfectly serviceable, entertaining enough Scooby Doo movie. And then Curse of the Lake Monster, I found to be enjoyable. Sure, Scooby Doo is definitely sidelined. That I think is an issue, but it's not all that bad. Then when you look at the animated movies, actually quite a good amount of them are fresh on Rotten Tomatoes, to be fair. Some of them aren't, but actually quite a good amount of them are fresh, or at least almost fresh. The highest score for the animated movies is Zombie Island, which has an 89% for Zombie Island is the highest score when you look at the animated movies. And yeah, that doesn't surprise me because Zombie Island is actually a really good Scooby Doo movie that actually can get pretty intense, at least for this franchise. Not to say that Scooby Doo and Zombie Island is like super intense. No, that's not what I'm saying. But for this franchise, it actually gets dark, especially for kids. Now, you got the movie Return to Zombie Island, which I think is a very disappointing follow up to the first movie. It's not a good follow up whatsoever. When it comes to actually highest score for each franchise, well, 89% is actually the highest score for Scooby Doo. That's easily higher than any of the scores for the live action films. When it comes to Wizard of Oz, the 1939 classic is a 98%. When you look at lowest score, in the case of Wizard of Oz, you got a 20. Actually, this movie called Legends of Oz only has a 16%. When you look at Scooby Doo, see, out of the films that I've included, which isn't every single one of them to be fair, but quite a good amount of them, Scooby Doo Monsters Unleashed has the lowest score of only 23%. When you look at average score, Scooby Doo is an average of 59, Wizard of Oz is an average of 51. When you look at gap between lowest and highest score, in the case of Scooby Doo, you got a gap of 66. In the case of Wizard of Oz, you got a bigger gap actually of 82. So Scooby Doo has actually won 3 of the rounds so far, so it's going to win regardless of my personal opinion. And well, in this case, I'm going to actually go for Wizard of Oz. Yeah, I've seen more Scooby Doo movies, to be fair. I've seen multiple TV shows, actually. I've watched Scooby Doo Mystery Incorporated, Where Are You, Scooby Doo, What's New, Scooby Doo. I've watched episodes, anyway, of A Pup Named Scooby Doo and one other TV show. But I think that Wizard of Oz is more iconic, it's more memorable. It goes back to what I was talking about earlier on in this video. I think that 1939 Wizard of Oz is better than any of the Scooby Doo movies. They'll wrap things up for this one.